Hello and welcome to this video presentation. My name is Paul Brett. I'm a Senior Software Support Analyst supporting the Transformation Extender product from IBM. The topic for today's videos is Catalog Maps for the ITX V1 REST API. Feel free to reach out to me on popular social media channels at Paul Brett Tech. While maps can be called via the ITX V1 REST API directly when deployed to the appropriate directory, it is sometimes advantageous to define, i.e. catalog, those maps, exposing them via the Swagger endpoint page. In this way, the map specification is documented and you can use less overrides in the URL that you call with the curl command or similar tool. So I'm starting this demonstration with an open command prompt, and as you can see I am in the data maps subdirectory. In the directory you will see that I have some key maps such as 1in1out.mmc and 2in2out.mmc. The source for these maps can be found in the following directory. In your IBM Transformation Extender installation, under Examples REST API Samples Maps, you will find a samples.mms, and within there you can build the 1in1out, 2in2out, and copy them manually if necessary to the appropriate data maps directory where the V1 REST API is expecting to find them. So with the direct run API we don't have to do any cataloging. I'm going to copy this URL from my notepad and run it in my command prompt. As you can see, I'm using the direct run API. I'm calling 1in1out. I'm defining my input card and output card and sending in the data. When I run this curl command, we get the response which has been capitalized, which is exactly what 1in1out does. Moving on to my second example, also calling the direct run API. This time I'm calling 2in2out, and I'm defining both the input 1 with a buffer, the word 1, and input 2 with a buffer, the word 2, and I'm saying that I want the output 1 and the output 2 to be returned to the command line. This will be returned in a JSON structure, and the data itself will be base 64 encoded. It's difficult to see, but the response from the map is both here and here, and the other card is both here and here. Now this JSON can be decoded with a JSON parser, and then the individual strings can be pulled out and a base 64 to text converter can be used, and you would get the two results would be 1 and 2, both in capitals. Okay, so how about calling the catalogued versions of the maps? Well, for that I'm going to need to switch to the REST API Swagger page and show you that the maps are not currently deployed as endpoints. Here in the Swagger endpoint for the V1 API, V1 ITX docs, you can see that nothing has been deployed. Here's the V2 endpoint page, v2/docs, also nothing deployed. We won't be using the V2 today, but I just wanted to show it to you, empty. To deploy to here, you do need to use the design server. And finally, the Swagger page. Here in the Map Catalog API, I can individually catalog each map. I can list the current map definitions, and I can delete map definitions. I won't be using this directly today. I am going to be using the scripted versions that are supplied with the product. So where the source maps were found, if we come back one directory and then into scripts, we have a batch script here called catalog_maps, and if we edit this, you can see that a variable is set to set the URL. This is actually incorrect. This is supposed to say tx-rest, but we'll ignore that for now. And this script is going to catalog all of the objects one at a time using the values that it will find in the descriptors subdirectory for each one of the maps. Today we're only going to be concentrating on 1 in, 1 out and 2 in, 2 out. We're not going to be doing any of the asynchronous maps. I'm going to show you the descriptors. Here we have the JSON to describe each one of the maps. In an earlier video I showed how you can use a special map to interrogate a map source file and generate the JSON descriptors automatically with only a little manual massaging required afterwards. That's definitely a video worth checking out. So here's the 1 in, 1 out definition. This is how it will be deployed to the endpoint, but this is the name of the actual map that it's going to look for. And there's a description of what the map does. Uppercase is the output from a single input, and it defines all of the cards. There's the input and there's the output, single card in each case. So let's go to use that exact description, but we're going to do it manually. As I said, we're not going to use this script for now. So back in my command prompt, let's clear the screen and choose from my URLs. Here is the script to grab the 1 in, 1 out JSON file. I've used a fixed path for this, and I'm calling the catalog API. So let's move that out of the way and run that. The map has been catalogued. If we switch back to the V1 API window and refresh by clicking on the green Explore button, you will note that the map definition is now here. And if we click the drop down and use the try it out button, we can then add a string to choose something to return from the map, put the request body in here if we want to, execute. But I'm not going to be using this interface for the moment. I'm just going to do a direct curl. So back to my list of URLs. Here is one way that I can send the data in. Control C. I'm going to clear the screen and call the map. This time I'm not using the direct run API, I'm using the catalogued API. So here we have ITX maps catalog. Here's the URL that was in that JSON document, test 1 in, 1 out. But again, I'm sending in the test data. You will note that I don't have to define the input and output cards anymore, because this is a catalogued map. They've already been defined. And this call automatically knows that all of the input goes into input 1 and you're expecting output 1. So if I execute this map now, we get the data returned in capitals. So that's one way of calling the API. Here's a second way. I'm calling the catalogued map again, but this time rather than accepting text plain and returning text plain and using the -d command, I'm accepting multi-part form data. I'm expecting back multi-part form data, and I'm using the -f parameter and saying that this string here, test data, needs to be sent into card number 1. Now this will become obvious later when we have 2 in, 2 out to execute, but this is just showing you that I can use this -f parameter when there's only one input card anyway. So the output is multi-part form data, so we get it all wrapped in this UUID nonsense, but as you can see, the data is actually in there. Okay, moving on to the next URL, which actually deletes the definition. So if I run that now, delete the definition, that URL is completed successfully. If I refresh this page by clicking on the green Explore button again, you can see that's disappeared. Okay, so let's deploy the second one. 2 in, 2 out is next. So I'm going to deploy the 2 in, 2 out map. I'm doing a curl post to catalog. Again, I'm calling with a fixed path all the way to that 2 in, 2 out.json file. Okay, that's been catalogued now. We refresh this screen and there's our catalogued 2 in, 2 out map. And let's explore a couple of ways that we might call this map. Now, first of all, I'm going to show you what happens when you attempt to call it with just one parameter, like we did with a 1 in, 1 out. The map definition itself is expecting 2 inputs, and we're using the -d command, which you can only send in one input. So although it seems to have completed, nothing has been returned. If in fact we were to do the verbose option, I think you'll get an error message in there 500 rather than a success 200 response. So that doesn't work. -D cannot work when there's more than one card involved. So let's switch to the second form, the multi-part form data, and paste that in. So now we're still calling the same catalogued map. We are using multi-part form for accept and content type here. -F, we can specify it once and say 1 equals 1. We can then do it again, -F, 2 equals 2. So then when we run this API, successfully calls the map, and we get a multi-part form structure back. The input for input card 1 has come out as output and it's been capitalized, and the output for card 2 has been capitalized as well. Back to my URLs, and here is the delete to remove that map from the catalog. If we go and refresh the Swagger page again, there we go, that's gone. I'm going to bring both of those back again. That's the 1 in, 1 out catalogued again. That's the 2 in, 2 out catalogued. Let's clear that screen, refresh this, and you can see them both deployed. The reason I did that was to come to the Swagger page and show you some of these map catalog APIs. So for example here, list all map definitions. I can click the try it out button here. I can click the execute button, and within my Swagger page it says that I have 1 in, 1 out deployed, which is expecting an input card, an output card. There's the plain description that we sent in, and moving down, here's the 2 in, 2 out that's deployed, the text description of that. Input cards 1 and 2 there, output cards 1 and 2 there. Everything that you'd find in the JSON definitions that was in the descriptors subdirectory. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my video presentation today. If you found the content interesting and informative, hit that like button. Perhaps leave me a comment. Consider subscribing to my YouTube channel, as I release content such as this on a regular basis. Feel free to reach out to me on popular social media channels at Paul Brett Tech. Thank you.